everyone by the numbers. The Penrith Panthers join the Roosters in the club Duo Elite, and the Reggae Warriors come to town as the World Cup rolls in. Yes, hello and welcome back to the Sideline Chat podcast, the one-stop shop for rugby league. Only Conor Marcellus with you tonight, 9:30 on the 15th of October Australian time. I am not joined by my colleague Mark Hendry because the producers, they put him on enforced vacation early. Apparently, he posted some dumb comment somewhere and the producers didn't like that, so they slapped him down harder than Jerome Luai got on. But that's neither here or there because we are hours away from week 1 of the 2021, officially he titled that way, of the Rugby League World Cup. Postponed because kangaroos piss everyone off these days. Hey, I'm saying it, I'm admitting it, we do. But here we are. At long last, England versus Samoa, St. James Park, Newcastle, your first fixture of this World Cup. And I gotta say, this is a pretty intimidating side. Joseph Suaalii given the nod at fullback with Brian To'o and Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow, the wingers. Isaac Targo and Stephen Crichton form up in the centres. In the halves, two-time premiership winning 5'8" Jerome Luai and the captain of Toa Samoa, Anthony Milford. And the forward pack, it's better from there for them. Kelma Tuolungi starting at lock forward with Jaden Sewer and Josh Aloiai in the back row. And up front, a devastating combo. Josh Papali'i, recently former Huddersfield dummy half Danny Levi and Junior Paolo. And off the bench, Tyrone May, Spencer Leniu, Marty Tapau and Chanel Harris-Tavita. And their coach, Matt Parrish. Pretty intimidating side, you might say. On the other side of the equation, we have the host nation of England. The White Wall now wearing navy along with everyone else, which was probably the only thing that set them apart. Captain Sam Tompkins at fullback. The wingers Tommy Makinson and Newcastle's very own Dom Young. In the centres, Callum Watkins and Herbie Farnworth by a great surprise, having missed half the year with injury. In the halves, we have Jack Wellesby and George Williams, the Warrington scrum half, with much scrutiny to that club's name. In the forwards, Morgan Knowles with Elliot Whitehead and Victor Radley starting in the back row. And up front, Tom Burgess, Michael McAlorum and Luke Thompson. Definitely earning the fate of the coach right there. And off the bench, all forwards, Matty Lees, Mike Cooper, Chris Hill and Mike McNeacon. And they're coached by Sean Wayne. I'm looking at this fixture first up. This is big for both sides. Because on one hand, everyone's been writing England off, whether that's right or wrong. I don't necessarily agree with all the comments being made about England. Toa Samoa, on the other hand, they have had a whole series of high-profile defections. And the question on my mind, and I think it's a question on everyone else's, is this the rise of the next Pacific League power? We looked at Tonga 5 years ago when Taumalolo and Andrew Fafita defected from their Tier 1 sides to come here and really spark a revolution, an international revolution. Because you had Matea Matonga, although downed in controversial circumstances by the host nation in the semi-finals, it was the beginning of something remarkable amongst the Pacific Islands. And I think we're going to see more of that here. Suaalii starting at fullback. I think that's an interesting question. Of course, you got Crichton, Tabuai-Fidow. They've talked about or have played at fullback, some with varying degrees of success. But what about the host nation? Well, I mean, you look at their spot. I think question of a halfback in form. I mean, I'm not doubting George Williams' performance, and he's obviously earned the confidence of Sean Wayne, the former Wigan Warriors head coach, I should say. So there is that small connection that they do share over several grand final wins. Jack Wellesby, of course, played half the year at 5A, so I'm not doubting his performance, and a really good knock for Dom Young over Ryan Hall, the veteran in this field and arena, not to mention one of England's great try scorers. With no Mark, what do I have to say? Forward battle's going to be interesting. I think Papali'i Paulo's ball movement and hard running against sort of, you got a more lightweight front rower in Luke Thompson, who's got a bit more footwork at the line. And then, of course, you got Tom Burgess, who's been carrying South's pack with Cam Murray for the last 2 years. And then, of course, the contrasting styles. Levi more likely to jump out of dummy half, and McAlorum more crafty with his hands. But ultimately, I think if you're talking direction, I think Williams owns Milford every day. I think that is pretty much the case. But key battle. Jack Wellesby, Jerome Luai. I think that's going to be a mouth-watering matchup. If it's forward odds taking it on, I think Samoa could easily... Well, no, I shouldn't say easily. I think Samoa will provide a good challenge to the English forward pack. But I'm going to go England 1-6 here. I think they see this as a good challenge to test where they're at the moment. And I think they can come away with a crucial 2 points here and then set themselves up nicely for the quarterfinal stages with wins possible against both France and Greece, also in the Group A poll. So I'm going England 1-6. Now, moving on, we have Australia up against Fiji from Emerald Headingley in Lee. It's a bit of a drama unfolding with the Bate, to say the very least, but nevertheless, this is how they do line up. Sonia Taruva at full back with Micah Sivo and Miteli Urikijapani. Got it right the first time. Lining up on the flanks. In the centres, it is the captain in his final World Cup campaign, Kevin Nagama, with Semi Valame, or at least I think it's his last. Getting pretty close. Maybe not. I should really think before I open my mouth. But nevertheless, in the halves, it is Sitoveni Mose Dreke and Brandon Wakeham lining up at half back. In the forwards, it is Lamar Manuel Levave. Hey, got there in the end. At lock forward with Viliami Kikau and Siwa Wong in the back row. And up front, Tui Kamakamefa, Api Korosau and King Vuni Yayawa. And off the bench, Ben Nakubawai, Aniala Sadrugu, Penio, Onita Agatuimua, and Jawasa Drolak Ungi. Wow, that is really a mouthful, and I hope I didn't butcher any of that. I hope. And they are coached by Awese Katavarata, who has taken over the side very late in the piece with initial head coach Joe Rebel ruled out through illness. So I wish him all the best. That's right there. On the other side of the equation, for the first time in 3 years, the green and gold of Australia will finally be flying for once. The captain, James Tedesco, lining up at fullback. The wingers, Josh Addo-Carr and Murray Talangi. In the centres, we have Valentine Holmes and Latrell Mitchell. The halves made up of Cameron Munster and Daly Cherry Evans, the vice-captain. Oh no, Cam Murray, the vice-captain. But wearing number 2. We'll get more onto that. In the forwards, we have Cam Murray packing down the scrum with Angus Crichton and Jeremiah Nanai in the back row. And up front, we have Jake Trebojevic, Ben Hunt and Tino Fasur Malawi. And off the bench, Jack Whiten, Pat Carrigan, Ruben Cotter and Harry Grant. And they're coached by Mal Meninga. Now let's just talk about this bullshit right here. So apparently, at the start of the tournament, organised by John Dutton, who's had to deal with a lot of pressures, of course, said that the World Cup, there were going to be names and squad numbers throughout the entire tournament. Now, when I think of squad numbers, of course, because of covering Super League for 2 years, my mind immediately clicked like, oh, okay, so rather than just have the 1-17 on the day, they're going to go 1-24, and whoever gets picked, that number's going to be there with them for the whole tournament. So fix a number in for the whole tournament, and that's how the lineup was going, Super League style, right? So the Australians had a different approach to that. Michael Hagan, the assistant coach, basically says, all right, well, if we're doing squad numbers, let's just do it based on the number of experience. So the more tests you played, the higher your number's going to be. So, for instance, James Tedesco, of course, he has to be the captain, so he wears number 1. And Daly Cherry Evans is the second most capped in this current squad, so he gets number 2, and so on and so forth until you get to those who've made their debuts, who are far down the list, to say Jeremiah Nanai wearing 22, and Murray Taulagi wearing 23. I gotta say, League Freak, with the Fergo and the Freak podcast, he's already had his say on this piece. He reckons that, well, if you just read his comments on Twitter, I haven't had a chance to sit down and listen to his podcast as late. Go give him a listen if you feel interested. But he sort of makes the point that it's really the World Cup's fault, because it says, like, they said, use squad numbers for the tournament. And the Australians go, okay. And then the way he frames it, they went, not like that. I mean, hey, look, it is a bit farcical, to say the least, but why did Michael Hagan come up with the idea of giving wingers is like Taulagi and Addo-Carr 9 and 23? I mean, seriously. Seriously. What an absolute joke. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, look at this. The squad numbers right here. Latrell Mitchell in the centres, but he wears as the eighth jersey number. Daly Cherry Evans. I mentioned he was wearing number 2. Let's see. What else we got here? Cam Murray wearing 11 and a lock forward. Not too controversial, I'd say. I mean, they were wearing 8 before all that changed. But, I mean, seriously. Taulagi in 23. Latrell Mitchell in 8. Addo-Carr in 9. I'm Ben Hunt wearing 3. Oh, my God. Why did they just have to do it? I suppose they had to be special somehow. Well, they'll certainly be special. They'll certainly stand out in the crowd and piss everyone off while doing it. That's just I'm not going to say it's eye cancer, but that is just, bruh. Why? Now, last time Fiji made the World Cup, it was probably one of the greatest upsets I have seen on the international stage. That match down at Sky Stadium in Wellington, a trialless affair. 4 points to 2. And of course, that beautiful hymn at the start. That was just, watching that live, I've not in the stadium, but just watching it at home live. Just the goosebumps of it all. This beautiful moment of prayer before achieving something extraordinary. And it was. It was absolutely extraordinary. Never before had I seen someone knock off the Kiwis, who are a formidable opponent. But the way that it happened, it's like a fairy tale. It was dead set. Grown men reduced to tears of pride and of passion for playing for their country, something far greater than, and well, I don't know what far greater than, but it's just the emotion of it, that this meant something, that they achieved something extraordinary. Can't put that into words. And they do have there are some quality standouts in there. Of course, the Penrith duo, Coruscant Kikau, and of course, Sunia Taruva, powerhouse wingers, Micah Sivo, and Hull's very own Elivulu Kichapani. Some definite strike power there, but I'm looking at the forwards, and again, it comes back to the forwards, and it's the halves. I'm looking Munster Cherry Evans versus Mosadreke Wakeham. Veterans by the international arena for Fiji, but against the Kangaroos, who's veteran halfback, who of course filling in for Nathan Cleary while he's rested, as well as most of the Penrith contingent in the Kangaroos side. I'm sorry, as much as I'd like to see something amazing happen, I just think this is going to set up for an absolute bloodbath. When they met in the semi-finals in Brisbane 5 years ago, it was a bloodbath, but I think it's going to come through the middle, whether it's crossfield bombs for Jeremiah and the speed of Harry Grant at a dummy half, linking up with Murray in the same vein Cook would have done, and then Cherry Evans and Munster pulling the strings with Tedesco who's sniffing around the ruck. I think Australia, as much as I don't want to say it, I think Australia win this 13 plus. This is going to be an ugly showdown, but I think if Fiji can at least be within, I don't know, maybe 2 tries striking distance, or at least be competitive for a stage of the game, I think they can go on and considering the opponents they've got in the rest of Group B, I think they are in good stead for another knockout stage appearance. Now, speaking of the rest of Group B, it is Scotland up against Italy. Lining up for the Azzurri at fullback, it is Luke Porcelli with Richard Laporte and Jake Mason on the wings. In the centres, it is Dan and Atkinson and Ethan Natoli. In the halves, joined by Jack Agnolo and Rade Robinson. In the forwards, they are led by Nathan Brown at lock with Luca Moretti and Luke Hodge in the back row. And up front, Brendan Santee, Dean Parata and Jack Colavate. And off the bench, Ryan King, Joe Tramontana, Giorgio Sararino and Ronnie Palumbo. Oh, and they are coached, if I am not mistaken, I can't bring up the coach at the moment. Stand by for that at the moment. See, this is what you get for spending 2 weeks out of it. It's you say you're going to sit down 3 hours ahead of time and you can't name the coach right then and there. That's not exactly the way you want to go down at the moment. But their head coach, if I am not mistaken, currently Leo Epifania. I can always fact check this later on. Now, meanwhile, for the Bravehearts, as they are known, Lachlan Walmsley, the Halifax winger, lining up at fullback with Matty Russell and Davey Dixon on the flanks. Closer into the middle of the field, it is Kieran Buchanan and Bailey Liu. And in the halves, it is Bailey Haywood and Salford fullback Ryan Briley at half-back. In the forwards, a very quality back row, James Bell at lock with Ewan Aiken and Kane Lynette in the second row. And up front, Logan Bayless-Brow, Liam Hood and Sam Luckley. And off the bench, Ben Helliwell, Kyle Schneider, Luke Bain and Jack Teenby. And their coach is Nathan Graham. Hi, the Bravehearts. The Bravehearts. If you remember the last time Scotland participated in the World Cup, it was an absolute disaster. You could have quality forwards, and I've mentioned some quality forwards in and amongst the Scots side right there. But you remember 2017. What happened to them then? It was 50 points put on them by Tonga in the first game. So it was only going to get worse from that point of Scotland's involvement. And shall we say, as I look to the Rugby League project right now, 50 points to 4, towed up in Barlow in Cairns by Tonga. 74 to 6 by the Kiwis in Scotland. In New Zealand, Scotland got towed up 74 to 6. That was probably the lowest point of Scottish Rugby League that had probably ever existed, before finally ending their campaign 14-all at Barlow Park against Toa Samoa. That's not good. A draw and 2 losses, that's not good at all, even with the limitations of the Scottish squad at the time, which, mind you, included a veteran half like Danny Bruff to steer the side around. Other valued forwards in there as well. Luke Douglas, of course, was in there as well. Matty Russell was there before. Alex Walker. There's some handy players in there, but they just couldn't do the job. Now, a lot has changed. Scotland has gotten some reasonable players in amongst the ranks, I would have to say. And I see no recognised name of... Well, Queensland Cup, I believe, has produced one of the halves for this affair. Campagnolo, Also, it should be interesting to see how this goes, because much was hyped about Italy last time out. Of course, they ended up finishing with believed to be a 1-2 record. Much hype. Of course, they did have James Tedesco and Paul Vaughan in the ranks at the time, but a lot has changed in 5 years. It should be an interesting contest, to say the least, but I think the Italians will walk away with this one. I think they will do this 7 points to 12. I think Nathan Brown will be looking to have a big game. Of course, called into the Grand Final only a couple of weeks ago, and will be looking to a point to prove, I would think, having been in and out of the side, to say the least. So we will see how he does, but the Italians to start off on the right foot. Now, for a moment of great excitement, the Reggae Warriors, man, Jamaica, making their World Cup debut against the clover-leafed Ireland side. Lining up for the Irish at fullback, it is Richie Myler, with the brothers Innes and Lewis Sr. on the flanks. In the centres, it is Ed Chamberlain and Toby King. In the halves, it is claiming it through the heritage rule, Luke Keary, the Sydney Roosters star 5'8", lining up with Halifax half Joe Keys, I believe, as last I remember. In the forwards, it is Harry Rushton at loose forward, with James Bentley and Frankie Holton of Hull KR in the back row. And up front, Liam Byrne, Josh Cook and Jamin Jolliffe. And off the bench, the captain, George King, James McDonald, Brendan O'Hagan and James Hassan. And they are coached by the first pure Irishman, Jed Corcoran, in for the first time. Meanwhile, on the other side is the new guys. It's Jamaica. They got a rugby league team. Ash Golding lines up at fullback with Ben Jones-Bishop and Alex Young on the wings. In the centres, it is Joe Brown and Jacob Ogden. In the halves, there's James Woodburn Hall and Greg Johnson, with the forwards made up of Jordan Andrade at lock forward, with Mo Agoro and Keenan Tomlinson in the back row. And up front, it is Michael Lawrence, Kieran Rush and Bradley Ho. And off the bench, AJ Wallace, Aaron Jones-Bishop, Ross Peltier, and Andrew Simpson. So, a couple of familiar names amongst this Jamaica side right here. I will verify the fact that like with the Italians, I don't write everything down, unfortunately. Rather embarrassing. So, let's see, right here, current head coach. I think the last I remember, it was in fact Jermaine Coleman that was in charge, though it probably... Oh no, current coach Romeo Monteith. He fakes to zero tackle for that right there. So it's Romeo Monteith that will be in charge at the World Cup. Well, I'm very excited to see how this goes, because I think this is a pretty even contest between these two sides. Of course, Ireland, I think, were the underrated performers at the 2017 World Cup. Very unfortunate not to advance to the knockout stages because of the fact they were in a lopsided Pool C or D from memory, where it was only the top side that went through, and that top side for them was Papua New Guinea. So rather unfortunate that they did not go through on this occasion. And of course, double checking the Italy head coach, it is Leo Epifania. So Ireland have gone with a very interesting side right here. Some quality back rowers, James Bentley, Frankie Holton, and having stepped up from Featherstone the year prior, Luke Keary, representing his Irish roots from his grandparents. And Richie Myler, of course, the ever-versatile Leeds fullback/half. Couple of names of note, of course, the Jones-Bishop brothers is Ben and Alex, Ash Golding from the Huddersfield Giants, alongside Michael Lawrence. Interestingly, Dom Young could have joined his brother in the side as well, but he elected to represent England. Not bemoaning him, but he could have been part of a story in the making. Jamaica with a rugby league team, and he could have been a big power play for them. Well, I'm not going to bemoan the fact that he's not there. This could go either way. I think if the Jamaicans could take a lot of heart after their draw they had with Scotland, I believe, the year prior at the Millennium Stadium in Featherstone. And I think they would have come together thinking, we could be on the cusp of doing something amazing. In a very competitive pool, I would have to say, hey, it's going to be a tough ask, of course. Also, you can't always be successful. Their pool includes Lebanon, the Kiwis, and of course Ireland, their current opponent. And for this Group C fixture, I don't know. This could be if they can get unsettled or the more experienced and much more fancied halves early. I think the Jamaicans are in with a chance if they can promote a free-flowing style of football that, I don't know, this is going to sound like a cliche from Cool Runnings, but if we walk Jamaican, talk Jamaican, sound Jamaican, and are Jamaican, then we should play like Jamaicans. Probably not the exact quote, but it's the exact sentiment I would probably be arguing right here. As much as I'd like to go with them, I'm looking at that Ireland spine right there. Myler, Grand Final experience, very versatile. Oh, underrated. Luke Keary, 3-time Premiership winning half with the Roosters and the Rabbitohs. Very much got some experience there. Joe Keys, he's been around the block. Josh Cook, Canterbury Bulldogs wildcard. Could he earn himself a contract extension? We'll see. And then you look at the forwards as well. Byrne, Bentley, Holton, Rushton, George King. All of these players are or will be at the top level this year and the next. I'm going to go with Ireland here. I don't want to say it, but I think Ireland will come away with a strong 1-6 win here. They'll have to earn it, but I think they can do it. Now moving on to the rest of the Group C fixtures, we have the Kiwis up against the Lebanon side. Bulldogs back Jacob Carraz will line up at fullback with Josh Mansour and Abbas Miski, the wingers. In the centres, it is Brad Moorcross and Josh Murray. In the halves, it is Adam Dewey and the Eels Grand Finalist Mitchell Moses. In the forwards, it is James Romanas with Hushabel Tasapel and Jackson Rame in the back row. And up front, it is Kane Kalash, Michael Tanus and Eli El Zakan. And off the bench, Anthony Leoun, Andrew Kazi, Reece Robinson, and Jalal Bazaz. And their coach, former former Wallabies head coach, Michael Checker. There's one for you right there. And their much fancier opponents, the New Zealand Kiwis, Joey Manu of the Roosters lining up at fullback. The wingers are Ronaldo Mulatalo and Jordan Rapana. In the centres, we have Peter Hiku and Chance Nickel-Cookstad. I'm surprised to say the least, but potentially a pleasant one. In the halves, we have Dylan Brown and Jeremy Marshall-King. Not sure if this is the final side, but I think this is what they're rolling with. In the forwards, we have Joe Tarpany locking down the scrum with Isaiah Papali'i and Kenny Bromwich, the back rowers. And up front, the captain, Jesse Bromwich, the Cheese, Brandon Smith and James Fisher-Harris. And off the bench, Kieran Foran, Moses Leota, Big Nelson Asofa Solomona, and Britton Nakora. And they're coached by Michael Maguire. Oh, this is going to be a lopsided affair. I mean, all good to Lebanon to finally getting their domestic situation sorted out. It has not been easy for the Lebanon side as of late. And of course, the Beirut Blast did probably knock them around a bit. It's as well on the domestic front with players probably in the Lebanon League domestic sides. But this is like Australia against Fiji. As much as you'd like to see the Lebanese pull off a surprise like they had done before, like knocking off France. Of course, they got over the top. I think they made Freddie Fittler leading them to the knockout stages of the last Rugby League World Cup. It was a brilliant story. But this Kiwi side, I think, is sniffing for blood, and I think they're sniffing for another World Cup title tilt right here. And I'm looking at this side, even though this won't be their full strength side until later in the tournament, this still looks pretty intimidating to begin with right here. I think they're going to focus all of their energy down the left-hand side. So that would be Lebanon's right side defensively. So I'm looking Mulatalo, Nickel Klukstad, and Brown and Kenny Bromwich to do a whole lot of damage. I think the Kiwis win this 13+. As much as I don't want to say it, and I'd love of myself an outside chance, not going to happen here. Now, these final three sides, we do not have fixtures for, so we only have to go off the assumption that whoever has been naming them has been, depending how we think they're going to line up. I haven't really thought about it. But we have the rest of the Group A fixtures, We have France up against Greece. Interesting comment. Laurent Fressignou spoke to Love Rugby League earlier in the day or earlier in the piece, and he said this was the best assembled French side that he's ever seen. Well, considering he's only been in the job a short time, that's probably a big, big call right here. But knowing the story that French Rugby League has gone through, we have covered it in the past. If you have missed it, you can always find our interview with Sylvain Houlet, the Toulouse Olympique head coach, on Facebook, or by going to Sideline Chat, and I can post the link down in the description below. But I'm looking at this France squad that has been assembled right here. Some of these names that are the future of French Rugby League: Corentin Lecam, Arthur Morgue, César Rouge, Justin Sangaré, Paul Seguer, Michael Goudemont, Mathieu Laguerre of the Catalan Dragons. This 24-man squad that the French have assembled. And there's only one player, Maxime Pouet, who is identified as coming from Albi, who play in the French Elite Championship. The only one. They're all Frenchmen. Most of them coming from either Catalan or Toulouse, with the exceptions of Louis Jouffret from Halifax and Gadwin Springer from the Beverston Rovers. But only one club of the French Elite Championship will be represented in the World Cup. Albi, one of the amongst the oldest names in French Rugby League, of course, Carcassonne, Toulouse, of course there as well, El Perpignan, and so forth. Catalan 13 amongst them. This is going to be a big test for the French, and especially for Monsieur Fressignou, because they have got England and Samoa in the same pool. This is also a big game for them, and of course for Steve Georgalis. It's another remarkable story we've got. There are three remarkable stories here. You've got Jamaica, you've got Greece, both in their first ever Rugby League World Cups. Of course, Rugby League in Greece was only recognised as far as August of this year. And they've gone for their big names, of course, Lachlan Ilias, Billy Magoulias, Peter Marmazelos, Ellis, and Billy Sarikis, of course, on the fringes of the Canterbury Bulldogs there. But Ilias, Magoulias, Marmazelos, some of the big names looking to do some real pride, to do Greece proud. And another remarkable thing, which I think is very noble of them, the payments they're going to receive for the Rugby League World Cup, they will not accept them. Instead, they will put that back into the Greek Rugby League Association to try and start some grassroots, which I would say bravo. Bravo, gentlemen. I think you will do regardless of whether you lose all three or win all three, I think just by being at the World Cup and competing and willing to do some good deeds to help inspire the next generation of Greek Rugby League players, I think you have already won. The fact that you're there after facing persecution for so long, and I think this would be a very interesting perspective to try and get. The perspective of the Greek